Good afternoon. Welcome joining us to celebrate the RTPI Awards for Research Excellence 2021. I'm Wei Yang, President of the RTPI. This year, I'm delighted to invite RTPI Young Planner of the Year 2021, Yuan Walker, join me, co-hosting the award. Before we start the formal proceedings, may I suggest everyone mute and turn off your video to save the bandwidth for the platform, please. After the awards announcement, we will invite all the winners, commended, and the finalists to take group pictures together, so please stay until the end. The RTPI Awards for Research Excellence recognize the best spatial planning research from RTPI members and accredited planning schools. The awards highlight the importance of academic research for policy and practice. The awards recognize the valuable contribution of planning organizations, consultancies, and local authorities to planning research. And also, the award aims to promote planning research more broadly. First, I would like to thank this year's award sponsors, Routledge, Taylor and Francis Group. The group is one of the world's leading publishers of scholarly journals, books, e-books, textbooks, and reference works. We are grateful for Taylor and Francis' sponsorship of this year's Early Career Researcher Award and the Sir Peter Hall Award. Our second sponsor, iDocs Knowledge Exchange. iDocs Knowledge Exchange is the first port of call for information and knowledge on public and social policy and practice, and has been assisting its members for 40 years to make more informed decisions, improve frontline services, and understand policy. We are grateful for their sponsorship of the Student Award, the Planning Practitioner Award, and the Sir Peter Hall Award. This year, the quality of submissions was extremely high. On behalf of the RTPI, I would like to thank all the entrants for their submissions. We received 49 submissions across the 4 award categories: the Sir Peter Hall Award for Excellence in Research and Engagement, Early Career Researcher Award, Student Award, and the Planning Practitioner Award. Submissions came from universities across the UK and overseas, including Hong Kong, South Africa, and New Zealand, as well as from public and private sector. Thank you all. At a time when multiple and interrelated crises are having devastating effects on people's lives and livelihood, on places, vitality, and vibrance, this year's submission highlighted the vital role that planning can play in supporting people and places, from improving resilience to extreme weather, to moving to a circular economy, and to improving health outcomes. In addition to our established award categories, this year we also run our biannual award for practitioners, the Practitioner Research Fund, which offers grants of £5,000 to enable planning practitioners to carry out research. Also, I would like to give my special thank you to our award judges. The awards would not be possible without our excellent judges, who have volunteered their time to review the entries, and we would like to thank you all for your continued support for the research awards. As in previous years, the RTPI 2021 Research Award Ceremony forms part of the UK Ireland Planning Research Conference. This year, it is hosted by the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at the Newcastle University to mark their 75th anniversary of planning education. Many congratulations for the anniversary. Like most events over the past year and a half, the research conference has been moved to an online platform. Over the next 2 days, delegates have the opportunity to attend online sessions covering a wide range of topics around the theme of reimagining the planning project. an excellent knowledge sharing opportunity for delegates to discuss the role and the purpose of planning, and that values, and what ideals and values could motivate planning thoughts, education, and practice at this crucial time. To celebrate the awards, we have invited two distinguished guest speakers to share their thoughts on the connection between planning research and practice. They are John Forrester, Professor of City and Regional Planning at Cornell University and editor of Planning Theory and Practice Journal, and Ben Clifford, Associate Professor at the Bartlett School of Planning at University College London. First, I have the pleasure of welcoming John Forrester. John earned both bachelor's and a master's degree in mechanical engineering before receiving his master's and PhD degrees in city and regional planning from the University of California. John's work has explored the micropolitics of planning practices, the ways planners work in between multiple and conflicting parties on complex and ambiguous problems, in fluid and contentious contexts. John's best-known writing including Planning in the Face of Power, Making Equity Planning Work, The Deliberative Practitioner, and Dealing with Differences. His forthcoming book, to appear in the autumn of 2021, is How Spaces Become Places. Placemakers Tell Their Stories. His recent articles also include Our Curious Silence about Kindness in Planning, and Beyond Blame, Leadership, Collaboration, and Compassion in the Time of COVID-19. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's an honor to have a few minutes this afternoon to speak to the issues of reimagining planning on this occasion of the RTPI Research Awards ceremony. I've done research on planning and planners' practices for an embarrassingly long time, and I'm still trying to get it right. And I find the challenges of research and planning no less fascinating and daunting than ever. I hope this afternoon to make a few provocative remarks that might challenge your ideas about planning research. And then I'd like to involve you too in some ongoing research. So first, the provocation. Because planning is an applied practical field, research in planning cannot be modeled on research in physics or the life sciences. This means that to improve planning differs from research to explain how cities work. A simple way to make this point might be to assume that we actually had terrific findings about how transport, land use, or climate mitigation could work. For example, call these great research results A, B, and C. Let's assume we had such results. Now think of the many ways that governments or authorities might actually fail to achieve or realize those well-researched results. No one might listen to our great results. They're too worried with other problems, or we are too obscure, or our timing is bad, or rival policy priorities displace our efforts, or public support for our great ideas is diffuse or distractible, or we face bureaucratic hurdles of procedural red tape, or we faced administrative rivalries between agencies, and so on. So we might then not just have grounded ideas about how cities could work better, however rigorous that research, but that research might all too often tell us nothing at all about what it might take for planners and partners in government or civil society to implement or actually to realize those great ideas and aspirations. We might have great ideas about research results, about how cities work, but know nothing about how to get there. Now, you might say, well, implementation is not our responsibility, planning is. But I'm afraid that's much too easy and too evasive a response. If planners don't anticipate what's actually achievable and how that might be done, and what's fantasy or wishful thinking instead, what sort of public respect can planners ever expect to gain? So in other words, if we confuse planning research, how planning might be better, with urban research, how cities might be better, we risk doing really excellent studies about cities and learning nothing about actually doing the planning to improve them. So let me suggest a homely analogy. If you're having difficulty with a parent or a family member at a particular time, you are far more likely to ask an experienced friend for advice than to Google search the academic literature about family dysfunction or about elder care. Considering actual cases, we need practical, even clinical judgment, not double-blind studies. And we learn from examples and better from exemplars and from rich context-embedded stories that might show us what doing better actually looks like. Anthony Giddens, your famous British sociologist, once likened a similar confusion about social science to waiting in a bus station for our plane to arrive. It's not going to come. If we want to improve planning, we'll have to study planning practices and relationships, planning ideas and actions, and we'll need to learn from planning cases to develop practical judgment, as well as any learning from more general studies and research. Okay, so now let's explore a second abiding problem together in 2 steps. This problem involves our practices of listening to one another in deliberations at work, with a focus, though, not on what we acquire or learn by listening, but on what our listening produces practically. So, please, I've lost my screen. So, please take out your smartphones for a moment and create an email message to send to me. My address is jffwdbr@gmail.com. I will read it again. John Frank 1, Victoria Daniel Betty Roberta. Okay, jff1vdbr@gmail.com. Now in the subject line, please put RTPI number 1. And now here is the question I'd like you to answer in just a few keywords in the subject line. What difference has it made to you when somebody at work has really listened to you? I want you to take 30 seconds of time and think of a time this might have happened. You're discussing something that matters, and the other person is really listening to you. What difference did it make? In just a few words, put your answers in the subject line after RTPI number 1, but don't send the message quite yet. So let me give you 30 seconds. Think about this. You're at work, you're talking about something important. Someone else is really listening to you. In a couple words, what difference does that make to you? Put it in the subject line, please. The email address again, John Frank 1, Victoria, David, Beatrice, Robert @gmail.com. Okay, let's go one more step. In the body of that same email message, if you've sent it, send it again. In the body of that email message, please put RTPI number 2 And now note, again, in just a few words, what difference it made at work when you realize that somebody else, as you're discussing something important, somebody else was not really listening to you. What difference did that make? You're talking, you feel it's important, and you realize they're really not listening. What difference did that make to you? Take a minute again, a few seconds. In the body of the message, say what difference that made after RTPI number 2. And please send me those messages, and I will send you back the collective results. Now, I have done this exercise in very different contexts at 5 universities in the United States, in Holland, and in China, in Xi'an, with both experienced professionals and first and second degree students as well. And I've found remarkably similar results. Students and staff and planners of substantial experience have reported that others listening well to them has produced this range of effects, for example, respect, inclusion, safety, support, dignity, connectedness, encouragement, reciprocity, and even more, empowerment. Now, this suggests not only differences that were made to us in our actual experience, as people have reported, but this suggests differences that we might also make as we work with others. Again, producing effects such as respect, inclusion, encouragement, reciprocity, and more. Now, these diverse groups also reported the effects that they thought it had made when they were not listened to. And again, these are effects that we might similarly produce by our not listening. These results included humiliation, exclusion, dismissal, respect, anger, disrespect, humiliation, exclusion, dismissal, disrespect, anger, self-doubt, withdrawal, wariness, defensiveness. Now, notice these comments suggest not what we acquire or what we learn by listening, but what we do in listening or in our failing to listen, in our working relations with others. Right? This is about not what we learn or what we're gaining in information, but what we do in listening or failing to listen. I find the range of dramatic results that these quasi-experiments have produced, the kinds of differences made, quite extraordinary. I've called the failures planner's foot disease, or the problems of deliberative malpractices, as I've written about them. This is a disease and a set of problems worthy, I think, of a good deal more planning research. Effects that we produce at quite low cost by either listening well or failing to listen. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have shared these thoughts with you and for your experiential answers to these questions about the moves that we can make, for better or worse, in planning, as we listen carefully to others and show it, or as we fail to do that and show that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for giving such a thought-provoking and engaging talk. It will be really interesting to see what are the RTPI members' response to you. And capable of listening and using the information gathered to inform an evidence-based plan making and place-making process is vitally important. Thank you once again, John. Now, I would like to welcome our second guest speaker, Ben Clifford, Associate Professor at the Bartlett School of Planning and Course Director of the MSc Spatial Planning. Ben is a political geographer with research and teaching interest centered on urban and environmental governance and policy, town planning, public engagement, and the changing spaces of professionalism and the public sector in an age of neoliberalizing governance. He brings interdisciplinary skills from across the social sciences, as well as experience of the policy process in action in central government. Ben has been involved in research on devolution and planning, the relationship between consent and the delivery of nationally significant infrastructure, planning deregulation, local authority direct delivery of housing, and outsourcing planning services and the public interest. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very grateful to the RTPI for the invitation to say a few words today, even if I've been given the slightly daunting task of following John in the lineup. John's comments about the difference in research and planning to that in physics or the life sciences runs to the heart of what for me makes being a social scientist so interesting. The challenges of the human element of, depending on your disposition, studying or co-producing research with people who of course have their own thought worlds, motivations, understandings and perspectives. The challenges as well as the opportunities of research are something I want to reflect on a little bit further today. These awards bring together both academics and practitioners, sometimes siloed members of what we might term the planning movement, to celebrate research excellence at the start of a conference with the theme of reimagining the planning project. In what might be a statement of the obvious, I believe research has a central role to play in any such reimagining of the planning project, with the potential to bring together academics, practitioners, and wider society, although such work will rarely be straightforward. When I received the invitation to speak today, I immediately remembered back to September 2018 and the RTPI Research Awards in Sheffield. And I remember being there in the Winter Gardens and rather delighted because I received an award for research excellence for the work I'd done with my colleagues Jess Firm, Nicola Livingston and Patricia Canales on office to residential permitted development in England. This work on planning deregulation has been marked by a certain amount of serendipity, some late nights, some frustrations, as well as opportunities and new experiences. So just reflecting on that a little bit further, one of the key challenges is, of course, funding. I've long been interested in planning reform as a sort of pillar of my own research. And in 2016, I was aware of a few articles in the sort of sector press, plus I had some of my own knowledge from my neighbourhood here in Croydon. I'm speaking to you from Croydon, about some poor examples of development that seem to have resulted from the government's deregulation of the control of office to residential change of use. I thought this was something that probably needed further research. I was really interested into how widespread these issues were. And I thought that would benefit from a range of complementary expertise that different colleagues at UCL could bring. So I suppose the first thing was just a bit of luck that the then RICS Research Trust actually wanted to fund someone to do research on what might at first glance appear to be a sort of fairly technical change in secondary legislation in England. And in fact, they were interested enough to fund two projects. There was another project led by John Hennebury from Sheffield, looking at the issue of permitted development from a cost-benefit type approach that went in parallel to our own. And so although a great deal of scholarship is unfunded, of course, the necessary data collection in this case simply couldn't have happened without that funding. Nor could we really have justified spending so much time on it, given the competing demands of a university in our neoliberal era. The second bit of good fortune, I suppose, linked to that is that my own department, the Bartlett School of Planning, is supportive of us doing direct costs-only research when you're working with a registered charity, for example, as a partner. It certainly wasn't full economic costs funding, and I strongly believe in the importance of a progressive higher education sector supporting academics doing research for less than full economic costs if there's wider social benefit. So with that funding, we were able to undertake between us hundreds of site visits, finding some truly shocking examples of poor quality housing in the process, and wrote this up as a report published by the RICS in 2018. At the time of publication, there was a bit of immediate interest in the sort of sector media, and we got invited to talk to some officials at MHCLG. And although I think some of the civil servants gave us a bit of sympathetic hearing, others, I have to say, seemed fairly dismissive of our findings. Going back to the central premise that there's a housing crisis, permitted development was created more housing, so therefore it must be a good thing. And of course, the line that in a free market economy, people could choose not to live in poor quality housing. Highly questionable assumptions, of course, but really reflecting the views of ministers responsible for the policy in the first place. And those views, of course, in turn, amplify the views and opinions of certain interest groups and think tanks who are currently quite vocal on planning reform, with perhaps very particular underlying drivers and agendas. So at that point, I think I felt slightly deflated, actually. I hadn't embarked on the research with a specific attention to be policy relevant at all, more just intellectual curiosity to see if these housing quality issues were really that widespread. And actually, as someone who's become known as a bit of a critic of permitted development, at the start of the research, I entered it with a slightly different view, thinking about perhaps some of the advantages of adaptive reuse of building. Some of the sustainability factors are quite important. But once we found what we did find through our research, I really came to believe that permitted development as a governance mechanism for adaptive reuse and for trying to create housing fit for habitation was wrong, and that this was something that should have clear policy relevance. Further, the policy relevance related to something that was doing an immediate and apparent harm to people's lives. I think it's easy to argue about the merits of letting market discipline govern housing design when you're not living in a studio flat the size of a small hotel room with barely any natural light, nowhere for your kids to play, and your immediate neighbours being a 6-lane dual carriageway, a waste transfer site, and a cement works. So while I've long understood through the work of people like Paul Kearney that so-called evidence-based policymaking is an area fraught with complexity, and that a lot of planning reform is, of course, highly ideological, the initial sort of response to our findings seemed to be one of dismissal, even in fact claiming permitted development wasn't deregulation, given that the secondary legislation is quite complex. It was slightly disappointing. Yet while we worked away on the sort of more scholarly publications to try and put our research into the broader intellectual context, over time that report did seem to be getting more and more attention. The broader media, not just the sort of planning media, but general newspapers, print media, the broadcast media as well, began to become more interested in permitted development. And some journalists brought more light to the issue through highlighting the vital lived experience of some residents in what got termed these slums of the future. These articles often cited our research, sometimes attributing it to the RICS, or sometimes being nice enough to actually name us, or even ask us for quotes or comment. And that media attention in turn, I think, did then help raise the issue up the agenda of different members of parliament who started to put pressure on the government. The research also got mentioned a lot by other professional groups, for example, the TCPA, RIBA, and of course, RTPI, which I think all then helped to contribute to the then Secretary of State announcing that while they would continue to expand permitted development rights, the government also wanted to commission some independent research into the quality of housing created through them. And the government then put the tender out for that research. I have to say my initial concern was whether I had time to even write the bid, let alone undertake the work. But by expanding our UCL team to also include Alex Lord and Rich Dunning from Liverpool, we were able to pull together something that did then get funded. This allowed us to expand our previous research, consider more locations, more types of permitted development, more potential measures of housing design quality. And again, I just found the data absolutely fascinating in terms of thinking through the consequences for the built environment. But the sort of roller coaster continued, the research roller coaster. So we submitted our report to the ministry and then we heard nothing for months and months. I knew there'd be some delay within the internal processes of government, but it was starting to seem a little bit excessive. And I got really concerned when last June ministers changed the regulations to say that permitted development conversions would require adequate natural light to all habitable rooms, because that was clearly a response to our research and the findings we'd made about how inadequate it often was. Yet this was happening when government hadn't actually published our report or even acknowledged our findings. And then in July, just before Parliament went into recess, our report was suddenly sort of slipped out on the government website. And the same day, various other sort of controversial reports seemed to be put into the public domain. There was no official response to it. And I thought, well, is that it? Homes need a window, until we know where the baseline for housing quality is now in England. A few months after that, however, there was then a special debate on permitted development rights in Parliament. A number of Labour members of Parliament were citing our report, while a number of Conservative backbenchers were actually threatening to rebel against the government. And suddenly, just before that vote, the Secretary of State announced that in future, all conversions from permitted development rights would need to comply with the nationally described space standards, which, to be fair, probably was the most significant thing we've identified in our report, and the one single measure that I do feel will most improve the quality of these conversions in future, albeit there's still lots of other issues too. Since then, that work on permitted development has somewhat informed my reaction to some of the other government planning reform proposals, in particular last year's white paper. If you're going to have a as-of-right planning system, as was the sort of central premise of that white paper, then you need a whole different and much more sophisticated approach to planning regulation in order to guarantee basic minimum design standards. And I've recently published a comparative paper with Manuela Madedi, who's thinking about what we can learn from Italy in relation to that. Because in the past, of course, the discretionary system has allowed planners to take a sort of holistic view of the merits of a scheme and apply what are often quite broad, catch-all local plan policies to try and stop really harmful housing. But in a more as-of-rights process, that wouldn't be possible. And the permitted development example shows us just how bad things can get when you don't have adequate regulatory safeguards. So why do I share all this detail about my permitted development research? Beyond this being a bit of an opportunity for some personal therapy, just because I think and hope it sheds light on different aspects of research in planning. The challenges of finding time, finding money, of whether something is going to become of interest to the wider planning movement or wider society. It's not always easy to predict when it will, I think. And even if it does become of sort of broader interest, whether it's ever going to have any influence on policymakers or not. Not that I'm arguing all research must somehow be applied. The emotional labour that can be involved in research is also another challenge, I think, sometimes. But despite all of those challenges, research is, of course, such an important endeavour for the planning movement. It's vital if we're going to have any hope of furthering progressive ideals to try and understand and face up to the complex overlapping crises impacting people and environment. And this needs good research. So, drawing to a close, I'm quite happy to admit that personally I probably have a slightly idealistic view of the potential of planning. I've got no doubt that my own version of utopia is very much at odds of those of others, particularly the fundamentalists who seem to have such heavy influence over current planning reform. But our response to multiple challenges cannot simply be to withdraw from these debates at all. Good quality research, I think, can continue to influence and drive progressive change. And that's why it's a pleasure to be invited to be a speaker today at these awards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, for sharing your insights. It demonstrated the crucial importance of linking planning practice with planning research. I often compare our planning profession with the medical profession. I think their research findings are often feed into their practice very soon. So how planners we can do that, I think is a quite big ask. We need to think seriously about that. And then it's so important to have adequate funding to support cutting edge, independent research. And also we can make sure these research fundings can be put into practice, influence policy making immediately. So I think it's so important we can ask these questions which practitioners and policymakers they may not have time or even think about. So we should really keep champion for that to make sure we have the independent research fit into our practice. Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing that. And also thank you, Ben and John, for taking the time to speak with us in this research award ceremony. I hope that you will stay with us, and when we move to the proceedings on the award announcement, and we will take good photos together. Please stay with us. Now it's the time to announce our awards. Let's start from Sir Peter Hall Award for Excellence in Research and Engagement. The award is named after Sir Peter Hall, who reflects his life's work to promote the wider understanding, planning, and to apply academic research to policy and practice. As such, it recognizes high-quality research that is likely to make an immediate impact beyond academia. The shortlisted entries for this year's Sir Peter Hall Awards are Circular Cities, A Revolution in Urban Sustainability by Professor Joanna Williams, Butler School of Planning, UCL. High-Rise Residential Development, an International Evidence Review by Dr. James White and Dr. Butch Sarin, the University of Glasgow. The Publication of Private Space Towards a Charter of Public Space Rights and Responsibilities by Professor Matthew Carmona, Butler School of Planning, UCL. The Whittling Away of Wonderful Ideas, Post-Consent, and the Diminution of Design Quality by Hannah Hickman with co-authors Nick Croft, Dr. Hooman Marojmand Arabi, Dr. Katie McClymont, and Adam Shepherd at the University of West England. Working Accessibility to Neighborhood Open Space in a Multi-Level Urban Environment of Hong Kong by Professor Wilson Tang at the University of Hong Kong, and co-authors Mr. Kenneth K.H. Wang and Dr. Kenneth S.S. Tang and Dr. Sui Y. Wang. The judges have commended the research Circular Cities, A Revolution in Urban Sustainability by Professor Joanna Williams, Butler School of Planning, UCL. The judges considered this book dealt with the most important issue for planners. The concept of creating circular cities is a crucial issue as we face the climate and biodiversity emergencies. The book clearly shows how city planners can help drive the circular economy agenda forward to reduce negative impacts and unlock economic, environmental, and social benefits. This is the first book showing the important role spatial planning can play in unlocking these benefits. The judges praised the breadth of material, its relevance, and the accessible and clear way these complex ideas were presented in a compelling and engaging way. Congratulations, Joanna. Now, I'm going to announce the winner of the Sir Peter Hall Award for Research Excellence. The winner is The Whittling Away of Wonderful Ideas, Post-Consent and the Diminution of Design Quality by Hannah Hickman with co-authors Nick Croft, Dr. Hooman Marojmand Arabi, Dr. Katie McClymont, and Adam Shepherd at the University of West England. The project explored the under-researched and poorly understood area of post-consent, the journey of a development from the point of permission through to delivery and ongoing management. More broadly, it encourages planning to be understood and as a more enduring process, and not one which finishes at the point of permission. With major planning reform on the agenda in England and the signaled intent to further front-load decision-making, understanding what happens post-permission is more, rather than less, crucial. The judges considered this research to shine a light on the vital but neglected area of planning practice, the place of design quality in post-consent processes. Presented in plain language, the research is a clear exposition of the need to ensure the integrity of the planning system whilst designing robust post-consent processes that are flexible in the face of changed circumstances, allowing consent features of a scheme to change where necessary. The judges agreed that the research is a valuable and timely piece of work, which has emerged from a fruitful dialogue between practice and academia. Many congratulations, Hannah, Nick, Woman, Katie, and Adam. The next, I'm going to present the Early Career Researcher Award. The Early Career Researcher Award puts a spotlight on high-quality work by researchers in the beginning phase of their academic career who are either RTPI members or who work in an accredited planning school. The shortlisted entries are data methodologies of contemporary urban planners, the role of questionnaire data within planning academia and practice, by Dr. Maeve McGuire, McGill University. Long-term perspective of land value uplift in planned new urban centers, measurement, modeling, and predictions, by Dr. Tianyin Yang, University of Cambridge. Workability scoring, why and how does a three-dimensional pedestrian network matter? By Jianting Zhao at the University of Hong Kong, with co-authors Dr. Guibo Sun and Professor Chris Webster. Are green space attributes associated with perceived restorativeness? A comparative study of urban cemeteries and parks in Edinburgh, Scotland, by Kan-Yin Lai at the University of Hong Kong, with co-authors Chimoy Saka, Steven Sun, Ian Scott. The judges have commended the research. Workability scoring, why and how does the three-dimensional pedestrian network matter? By Jianting Zhao at the University of Hong Kong, with co-authors Dr. Guibo Sun and Professor Chris Webster. The judges found this research clearly presented with plenty of evidence of rigorous analytical and critical skills at two levels: the construction of statistical model with the definition of variables to input into the model, and the interpretation of the results, showing how and when underestimation of workability in pedestrian networks takes place and why. Congratulations, Jian, Guibo, and Chris. Now I'm delighted to announce the winner of the Early Career Research Award is Data Methodologies of Contemporary Urban Planners, the role of questionnaire data within planning academia and practice, by Dr. Maeve McGuire, McGill University. This thesis explores the role of survey data within planning by examining how and why survey data are collected by academic and practicing planners, and exploring the weight that these data have within planners' decision-making processes. The research found that survey methods are heavily used within planning, but are heavily influenced by the political context in which such data are sought. The judges commented, they found this is a clearly written and accessible piece of research on an important and topical subject, with clear and important contributions to planning practice and research, and to planning education. The panel was particularly impressed by the quality of this careful and insightful reflection on how data is used in planning research by both academics and practitioners, and how they understand and deal with bias and error, and how this can shape policy in intended and unintended ways. Congratulations, Mei Wei. Now, I would like to invite Rain Walker, RTPI Young Planner of the Year 2021, to present this year's Student Award and the Planning Practitioner Award. Rain, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wei. The first accolade I have the pleasure of awarding today is the Student Award. This award is aimed at students who are working towards or have recently completed a non-research university degree. It highlights the methodological rigor of the research as well as the ability to link research and practice. The shortlisted entries for the Student Awards are Climate Justice Implications of Planning Responses to Urban Heat Islands, London and Berlin by Samuel Nebo Shirada at the University of Brighton. Problematizing a Child's Right to Clean Air for Play in London by Bridget Taylor at the University of Reading. Creating Healthy, Climate and Resilient Cities, the Role of Effectiveness of Green Factor Policies by Nicole Collum at the University of Brighton. The Opportunity of Strategic Planning in Delivering Sustainable Low-Carbon Homes in Wales by Nia Jardine at the Cardiff University. Planning in Times of Crisis, the Impact of COVID-19 on Informal Workers in Warwick Junction, Durban by Rebecca Plumley at the University of Cape Town. Planning Healthy Weight Environments by Helen Pennington at the University of Brighton, and Urban Trees, Benefits and Planting Strategies, Belfast 1 Million by Perla Mansour at Queen's University, Belfast. So, the judges have commended the research on Climate Justice Implications of Planning Responses to Urban Heat Islands, London and Berlin by Samuel Nebo Shirada at the University of Brighton. The judges noted that this submission made a clear demonstration between urban heat island effects and climate justice, a clearly expressed and systematically researched topic which assessed policy and practice. With dissemination of findings already creating discussion and exchanges, this was worthy of a highly commended status in further highlighting the importance and urgency for us to consider the impacts of these findings. I'm now delighted to announce that the winner is Creating Healthy, Climate Resilient Cities, the Role and Effectiveness of Green Factor Policies by Nicole Collum at the University of. This study examines the strengths and weaknesses of green factor policies in different locations and the early impact of the new London Urban Greening Factor, UGF. The relative simplicity of the green factor policies make them appealing to planners, but has arguably led to a lack of scientific rigor in their formulation. The research identifies a need for a robust evidence base to inform local UGF targets and to link them to wider green infrastructure strategies. The judges noted that this was an excellent submission which not only tackles a timely area of interest, but is highly relevant in considering the benefits of green infrastructure through green factor policies. This was both informative and clearly expressed with links to both present and future policy and practice. It provides an informed approach to the need for climate justice within spatial planning. Many congratulations, Nicole. And now for the second award I have the pleasure of presenting today, the Planning Practitioner Award. So this award is aimed at non-academic planning practitioners and organisations conducting valuable research with the potential to inform planning policy and/or practice. The shortlisted entries are Coventry Cathedral Conservation Management Plan by Rebecca Burrows and John Wright at Purcell Architecture Limited. Effective or Defective, the Housing Delivery Test by Colin Robinson at Litchfields Planning. The Impact Assessment Guidebook by Gillian Dick and Rania Sermpezi at Glasgow City Council with co-authors Ardina Dumitriou and Dr. David Tome Lourido at the University of A Coruña at the Department of Psychology. And finally, Complex City, London's Changing Character by Anthony Rathkin, Jane Manning, Daniel Elsey, Lionel Aid and George Garafagas at Alison Morrison. So the judges have commended the research on Effective or Defective, the Housing Delivery Test by Colin Robinson at Litchfields Planning. The judges judges noted that this paper goes a long way in helping planning practitioners understand the practical impact of the housing delivery test in making planning decisions which affect the delivery of much needed housing. It offers a helpful contribution to the continuing debate on the policy framework for delivering housing and explores the practical implications of government policy in an innovative way. And now, it's my pleasure to announce the winner of the Planning Practitioner Award, who is Complex City, London's Changing Character by Anthony Rathkin, Jane Manning, Daniel Elsey, Lionel Aid, and George Graphicus at Alice M. Morrison. So London's Changing Character is a detailed mapping of London's historic layers, emerging from our work in characterization studies throughout London, and puts forward a new argument for character-based densification. Using extensive mapping and documentary photography, Complex City makes the case for a finer grain understanding of density as an essential ingredient in accommodating growth responsibly. It concludes with recommendations for any local authority or city which is facing the dual dilemma of accommodating growth and preserving local character. The judges' comments stated that this research explores and draws upon a wide range of data sources and presents them using GIS as an innovative and interesting mapping tool to understand the character and history of a place, in this case, London. The tool, using historic and current data, helps reach a finer grain analysis and understanding of the character of a place as an aid to accommodating growth, including increasing density whilst preserving local character and heritage. The approach is widely applicable and includes an assessment of how it could work in other cities facing similar growth pressures, a real contribution to the understanding of placemaking. So many congratulations, Anthony, Jane, Daniel, Lionel, and George. Well done. I would now like to pass back to the RTPI President, Dr. Wei Yang, to present the Planning Practitioner Research Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Many congratulations to all the winners. Last but not least, to conclude our award ceremony, it's my pleasure to present our biannual Practitioner Research Fund, which will award 2 recipients £5,000 each to carry out planning research. The first recipient of the fund is Oscar Wang of the proposal Strategic Legacy Planning for Mega Events to Achieve Sustainable Development Goals. Critical Lessons Learned from London Olympics 2012 and Rio 2016. The judges praised this proposed research work for its topical and international perspective. The judges were impressed by the candidates' ability to demonstrate a background of research work, including voluntary positions hold. Our second recipient of the fund is Timo Morse for the proposal Regional Community Wealth Building in Scotland. The judges welcomed the research proposals for this important emerging policy area, which is of relevance to Scottish policy, but also applicable across the UK and Ireland, especially in light of the need to achieve of equitable post-COVID economic recovery, and giving a clear role planning can play in doing so. The candidate also demonstrated a strong background of policy, practice, and research work, including voluntary positions hold. Many congratulations, Oscar and Timo. I look forward to reading your research findings in the near future. Now, we have presented all the awards for this year's RTPI Awards for Research Excellence. Many congratulations to all our winners. I would like to thank all the entrants for their submissions too. Now, may I invite winners from all categories, our guest speakers, John, Ben, Ryan, to turn on your video for a group photo, please. And also our Chief Executive, Victoria Hughes, is with her today. So Victoria, if you can turn on your camera to take the group photo, that would be great. Thank you. Sam, can we stop sharing the screen, please? Just let me turn on the camera. Spare me a second. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We need to take 2, I think. I have the 2 screens now. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I need to take another one. I have to make it full screen. So 1, 2, 3 again. Thank you. Now, may I invite, please stay on, all the winners, and also may I invite all the commended award winners to turn on your camera, please. I'm not sure how I can manage this. Not sure how many people I can get, but I will try my best. Thank you. Just another second. Let's take another one. 1, 2, 3 again. Thank you. Okay. Can we have all the shortlist entries to turn on your camera, please? Okay. One final shot. One final shot. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So many congratulations to all our winners. Thank you. And spatial planning is an applied social, environmental, and behavioral science. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to celebrate the best and the brightest work in the sector, which is vital in driving our profession forward. This research project offered unique insights into the challenges we face and how planning can be a positive force to tackle them. I'm really grateful to all our applicants for sharing their fresh and innovative work, and the invaluable contribution from our sponsors, judges, our guest speakers, Young Planner of the Year, Newcastle University, RTPI Research and Policy Team, and the event team. You made the award so inspirational. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing the cutting-edge research being applied into our planning practice, policy, and education. Same as our Sir Peter Hall Award winners have pointed out, planning process does not finish at the point of permission. Equally, research projects do not finish at the point of publication. It is crucial to apply these valuable findings into our day-to-day planning practice to make our world a better place for now and for the future. Thank you for joining us today. I send my best wishes to you all and wishing the UK Ireland Planning Research Conference a great success this year. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
So long, everyone. Thank you for
Well
the ability to participate.
Thank you, Liang. Shall I leave?
Okay. Thank you.